How's everybody doing? So I am Jonathan. I'm the founder of Neverware, and the good news today is that I'm actually not going to be speaking that much about what we're doing so much as the greater movement that we're seeing in education computing and in enterprise computing, and how the two of them are kind of coming together in a way that's probably going to have a lot of big changes across how IT in general is done. How many people here, by a show of hands, are from work with a school or a nonprofit? Tech startups? How many people here are from corporate learning? And then regular corporate? So both corporations and, I'm sorry, how do I do this? The green button. Tech guy figured it out. So both corporations and education have currently been moving rapidly to the cloud. But the really interesting thing is that each of them have moved to the cloud in a completely opposite end of the IT stack from each other. So the IT stack is made up of two halves, essentially. One half that everybody recognizes is computers, end-user devices. That's what we see and what we interact with. And then the back end are all those really big machines that they keep in data centers that make the internet and corporations go. So in enterprise, what we've seen is a rapid explosion of cloud computing. So anybody here who's ever used Salesforce, knows that you can now access your stuff from anywhere. This has completely transformed many big enterprises, how they do business, and also the companies that are making money providing these services. Now, that has affected just about every piece of IT in the enterprise, except for that other side of the stack, which is the end-user computers. People are still there on their old, clunky laptops that still need to get replaced every few years, that break. Now, the funny thing is schools have done the exact opposite. With schools, they have begun using the new cloud operating system for the desktop. How many people here have heard of Chromebooks? How many people here have used a Chromebook? Have you ever had a Chromebook slow down on you or have to replace it? The beautiful thing about Chromebooks is that there's nothing on the device. You have an end-user device that's completely focused on the cloud. Now, the growth of this has been huge in schools. Suddenly, schools that had a hard time keeping up with replacing and providing technology for all their students have suddenly been able to provide a massive amount of IT for their schools. One of the reasons that this entire growth in the edtech industry has been able to exist is because these cheap, reliable devices have suddenly been able to supercharge the one-to-one initiatives in schools and the overall tech uptime. Nowadays, schools really just have to worry about, do they have enough devices and do they have Wi-Fi? Now, this also aligns with the movement of how the millennial generation is moving to the enterprise. Millennials are extremely non-committal, and that's seen the rise of the so-called gig economy, and that's seen the rise of distributed workforces. Now, there's a number of companies that have begun moving to that. So if you are using the kinds of IT that schools are already using today, which has reduced all of their IT costs to a tenth of what they were previously paying, you have a workforce that's already able to work from any location. And you've seen certain companies that have begun decentralizing their operations using the end-user side of the cloud. So one example is Amazon. And you've seen not only their back-end cloud growth, but the massive amount of security, manageability, performance, and flexibility that they've been able to offer, which has greatly expanded the number of work pools that they're able to bring on and the flexibility of those work pools. Unfortunately, there's been a very anemic growth of cloud user devices in enterprises as opposed to education, where education has largely leapfrogged into the cloud era, similar to cell phones in Africa, where they had an extremely poor pre-existing infrastructure that made them so desperate for a solution that they bet everything on this new era of connecting directly with the cloud from devices and not having to worry about individual IT. Corporations with a lot of legacy scenarios have been very slow to advance there. Now, what we've seen is with Chromebooks, Google has made a massive play that has completely replaced iPads in being able to push out a lot of these devices to schools. The problem is that there are still these dedicated devices. What we've done is we've taken the operating system from Chromebooks and we've created an installable version. So now many schools that have been starting to replace their PCs with Chromebooks are no longer throwing out their PCs. They're buying Chromebooks and they're turning the rest of their existing computers into Chromebooks. We're also starting to see adoption by enterprise, as enterprise is moving the last mile of that IT stack to get rid of the older legacy end-user devices. So we're essentially getting rid of the entire legacy IT side, first with schools, and now it's moving into enterprise. This allows for the device flexibility of any form factor that schools have had, and now that enterprises have, and the application flexibility of, despite using the cloud, being able to use any application that an organization has. So I'm out of time, but to summarize what we would most be seeking right now, we already have a very large customer base. We're in more than 5% of all US school districts. And we are starting our first large deployments into enterprise. So any companies who are focused on OEMs or systems integration that we are not going to be disrupting by moving out into those markets, we have a number of, I think, large deals that we could really use value-add partners on. Thank you.